Perfect. Excellent. So maybe we can go ahead and start that. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our panel. And it's really quite a pleasure for me to introduce to you all a great panel of 4 professionals in circular economy that are going to be here with us today. And so I'll start with the 2 panelists that we have here in person. We have Lucas Puender, who is the co-founder and CEO of Retraced. And next to me, I have Fernanda Accorsi, who is the lead sustainability and communications marketing for plastics. Online, we also have 2 panelists. We have Mattia Kurma, who is the co-founder of Forestmatic. And we also have Thijs Martens, who is the lead sustainability and circularity consultant for Philips Consulting. And so they're joining us from different locations, but we'll have them be part of this. Today, in terms of format, the plan is for, I'm just going to ask a few broad questions, and we'll have the panelists give us their answers and perspectives. We want to keep this sort of in a conversation type of mode. And then we'll open it up to any questions you may have on this topic as well. Excellent. So the very first question we have, and what I've asked the panelists to do, is to first tell us a little bit more about what their companies do, because I feel like it's hard to ask them how your company is changing the game in circularity if we don't know quite well what their companies are doing, right? So we'll start with that. And so I've asked them, number 1, to tell us a little bit more about what their companies do, and second, how are their companies changing the game when it comes to circularity? And so how about what we're going to be doing for the questions is we'll change who's starting with the answers. And so maybe what we could do is start with our panelists who are here for this question, and then online, and we'll do it the other way for the second question. So let's see, Fernanda, would you like to get us started since I have you next to me here?
Can you hear me well? Yeah, no? You're very close as well. So good morning. Thanks for being here. I assume that all of you guys are familiar with circular economy, with all the climate action challenges that we have today. To give you a little introduction, I'm working with a startup called Plastics. Plastics is a marketplace that is connecting, from one side, plastic producers, the other side, waste management companies, recyclers, transformers. We use a smart contract approach, which means the blockchain protocol, to actually guarantee the traceability of the plastic throughout this supply chain, the waste management supply chain. And what we offer is a plastic recovery guarantee system, where these plastic producers, they upload the recyclers, they upload the information, the invoices of all the plastics that they are actually being able to recover and recycle. And consumer brands can come and can acquire this plastic recovery guarantees, and they can actually show their consumers their compensation. No? So for one side, they need to evaluate what was always all their plastic production, so that they're actually able to compensate, decide to compensate. By doing that, they're complying with EU regulations, and not only EU, but in each one of their countries. And they can show their consumers that they're actually doing something so that plastic's not ending up in the environment.
And how is this model sort of changing the game when it comes to circularity, and specifically in your case with plastics? I mean, what do we expect this model is going to be doing, and how would we see it scale as well?
Well, first thing is understanding the role that plastic is playing here, right? When you talk about climate action, plastic is, especially disposed plastic, is one of the materials that is actually issuing as well greenhouse gases, no? And throughout the whole supply chain, to be able to provide the products that we're buying, that we're purchasing daily, no? And then to be able to manage all this waste, we're all the time issuing the CO2 emissions and other greenhouse gas emissions. So what plastics is doing is actually offering the possibility to companies to be responsible for what they're putting out there, right? not only single-use plastic packaging, but also all kinds of plastic. We're exactly talking to Lucas as well, which is in the fashion industry. Many fashion companies as well, they're using polyester in their clothes, are interested in being able to demonstrate the plastic that they are generating, and they can actually compensate. How we're changing the games is that we're actually giving the tool to these companies so they can first measure what they're producing. No, let's say that a company is producing 100 tons of plastic, which is very little, it's much more than that. But 100 tons of plastic, then you can identify, and you should identify what kind of plastics, no? If it's polypropylene, if it's polyethylene, if it's high density, low density. So we can actually provide this approach with this company, start measuring with them, and they can decide how they want to compensate. When they do that with our platform, we are actually increasing, like offering a second stream of revenue for the recyclers, because the recyclers are not only now receiving from selling the plastic to the recyclers, not to the transformers, but they're also making an income by being able to prove the traceability of what they're actually being able to recover and to recycle. So that's the most important thing on the platform, is bringing this traceability, this proof of a model, no, that the plastic is not ending up out there, I would say.
Thank you. So yeah, that traceability as well.
Mm-hmm.
Lucas.
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me today. My name is Lucas Pünder. I'm one of the co-founders of Retrace, and Retrace is all about bringing transparency into the fashion industry. So we're helping fashion brands, fashion retailers, but also fashion suppliers to, in the first step, to understand their supply chains, because nowadays most companies don't know where their products are coming from. And if you want to work in sustainability, you need at least to understand which companies you're actually working with. That's usually the first step. And the second step, we are then collecting as much data as we can from these companies. So we are building a network, meaning that every company has their own profile. And by connecting to the profile, you can access all the data that's stored in the profile, and you can ask for more information around social compliance, environmental compliance, about energy consumption, water consumption. So all of this data is flowing to you. And the second step, we help them to assess this data. So what are the risks of the suppliers? What are the countermeasures in order to mitigate these risks? How is the profile looking? What is still missing? What information are you lacking? So that you get a good understanding of where you want to be, where you are right now, and what you need to do in order to come from A to B. And the final step is about sharing this data. Similar to what you explained just now, it's about sharing it to the consumers, to us, so that we can make more, let's say, informed decisions about our purchases, to create more trust to the consumers as a marketing and sales driver, but also to investors. ESG reporting is of course currently a very, very big topic, or even the government itself, because there's more and more regulation coming up. We have one in Germany already, with the Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, that is forcing companies of a certain size to actually prove that they take responsibility and action with regards to the risks they see in their supply chain. And there's currently a draft announced on the European Union level, which is then of course also affecting Spanish companies and companies all over the European Union of a certain size. And this is exactly where we try to help.
And so with that, how do you see this changing the way that companies currently operate? Where do you see the biggest changes really coming from?
I think the biggest problem is when it comes to sustainability management, it's about setting priorities and really understanding where the problems are. And this is about having the right data at the right time. And this data right now doesn't exist, because the supply chains in the fashion industry, let's say, different to the automotive industry, where, say, Volkswagen and Bosch are working together for probably nearly hundreds of years, yeah. There's a very strong connection. So when Volkswagen is deciding to produce another 1 million cars, the same second Bosch knows, okay, now we have to create all the components so that we can deliver them to Volkswagen. So there's already a very close connection between the companies on an IT level, so that there's a very good data flow between each other. In the fashion, this doesn't exist, because first of all, the supply chains are very diverse. We have global supply chains with hundreds of specialized companies that take small steps. And these companies are not connected at all with each other, because let's say, depending on the season, you're using different materials. And because of this, you're already changing your supply chains. And because of this constant change, it doesn't make sense to put the investment to connect the companies. So data collection is currently manual. Like most companies, independent of size, are working with Excel files. These are huge files, but they're not helpful in order to get a good overview of what's going on, and they don't help you to make better decisions. This is actually exactly where we come in. So we standardize the data collection, we give a better overview, and with this you can make better decisions of where to focus on next, where the biggest impact are, what my biggest levers are in order to improve my supply chains, and where maybe my gaps are, where I don't know what's going on, where you also of course need to start to invest and look into.
So just so that I understand this also, and we're more clear about the model, that your clients would give access to their suppliers. How are you integrating data from their suppliers into the system? Would they give access to them directly, or do you just have a good interface with whatever else they're using?
Yeah, it really depends a little bit. So we have a direct, let's say, manual data input from the suppliers, but what we do is we tap into other, let's say, primary data sources that are already out there, like certification bodies, like risk assessment, the World Bank that has certain indices that tell us stuff about the suppliers depending on the country they're located in. So we're taking all these official data sources and enriching the profiles with this. This is not, of course, everything, but then, of course, we can then ask based on what we already have. Let's say we see, very easy example now, we have a supplier in Spain, we have a supplier in China. And the risk of child labor is, of course, much higher in China than it is in Spain. So depending on the risk that you see, based on the country and the indices that are given from us, from the official sources, you can start to adjust your compliance management, because depending on where you produce, you need to be a little bit more strict. You can be a little bit more soft on your compliance requirements. And this, of course, already is a big help. So it really depends on what data you're looking for, but we try to get as much as we can automatically into the profiles. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to move now to the panelists that are online as well, so we can hear a little bit more from them too. How about Mattia? Can you hear me? Perfect. Can you, just please let us know a little bit about Forestmatic, and how do you see Forestmatic is really changing the game when it comes to circularity?
Absolutely. First of all, I would like to thank IESE for having us and for having this panel on circularity. I'm Mattia Courmat, co-founder of Forestmatic. We are a data-driven digital solution that connects brands and businesses with global restoration projects. We work in the nature-based solution field, and I cannot think of anything more circular than our nature itself. Working with forestry managers and forestry management techniques, we have saw as one of the main problems today is actually how can we track everything that we're doing, and how can we monitor that the effects that we are actually producing are both conveyed to our clients and also acknowledged, because there's a big blindness today towards carbon and towards CO2 emissions, but there's a number of other aspects, and I like also to have here Fernanda and Lucas, which are talking from a different perspective and bringing plastics, for instance, into the game, because we're always talking about carbon, but there's plenty of other problems that our biodiversity and ecosystems are suffering. Trees and actually, I would say ecosystems, forest ecosystems are one of those that actually provide to the European Union alone 47.5% of the whole ecosystem services provided to the European Union. So, which means that we need to be able to monitor them, we need to be able to have first-hand data, and we need to be able to create analysis that are good both for the direct beneficiaries, which usually are rural communities and local communities operating in these areas, and also for corporations and the whole civil society, which actually benefits from these ecosystem services. So as Forestmatic, what we do is try to provide traceability to the whole concept of ecosystem restoration and monitoring the real effects that this investment is creating.
Okay, thank you, Mattia. And at last but not least, we have Thijs Martens from Philips.
Unmute myself. I hope you can hear me.
We can, thanks.
Okay, great. Yeah, so Thijs Martens work with Philips, the health tech company, formerly known for its light bulbs and televisions, but we are currently in the business of health technology. When it comes to our purpose, we have this goal to improve the lives of 2.5 billion people by 2030, and in line with that, we of course also understand that nature is perhaps our most important stakeholder. And in that sense, we are sort of trying to drive innovation and improve sort of the balance between health of people and the health of our planet. When it comes to my role in that, I take a role in really, let's say, bringing innovation to life in our organization. So we have a strategy, we have very ambitious goals, for instance, around the 25% revenue coming from circular products and solutions, but also closing the loop of all our medical equipment, right? But what does that mean at the business level, and how can you get that done? That's where me and my team come in, and it's a very exciting field to be working in. I'm also very happy to see the other panelists here, because I feel like we have a long way to go to make, let's say, circular economy a business reality, and maybe we're never finished. So yeah, very much looking forward to the rest of the panel.
Excellent, thank you. And one of the questions here, Thijs, is really specific to how you think you're changing the game. I mean, obviously, we're getting involved in all this innovation, etc. But where do you see the biggest impact that so far you've been able to make, or that you see yourselves? Either you've made it, or you see yourself being able to make it in a relatively short term.
Yeah, so we are relatively seen, especially in our sector, we are a first mover when it comes to delivering on the circular economy principles. So designing out the concept, set of ways, trying to create a regenerative economy. And from that perspective, we are also, let's say, among other front runners in different sectors, the first ones to encounter the more systemic barriers, as well as the more operational and capability related barriers to making circular economy work, right? So what I think at this moment, and it's also where my team operates, is our biggest impact is that we are helping others to accelerate their learning journey when it comes to understanding where they need to pay attention, where we need solutions, where we need policy changes, and where we need, let's say, people to put things into practice.
Thank you. And so I think this panel is on technology and circularity. And so I think that a big question here is, what is the role of technology, but also what are the challenges? Because obviously technology will give us part of the solution, but not everything. And so I'd really like to post this on the panels. Number one, what is the role of technology in advancing circularity? But also number two, what are the challenges you've seen so far when it comes to technology advance and circularity? And so what I'll do now, I'm actually going to switch this a little bit. We're going to have maybe one live panelist start, and then we'll go online, then we'll go back live, and then we're going to go online again. So how about we start with you, Lucas?
Yeah, it's definitely a great question. And I think something where we are definitely, during our journey over the last couple of years, definitely changed our opinion. Because in the beginning, when we started with that, said like, yeah, technology is everything. We just get it done, we get it out there, and it's solving all problems. Because wow, we're building some amazing tech. And this was completely wrong, because what we realized is that people need to use what you're building. So in the beginning, we started like with a super complex traceability system where you had to input so much data, and the suppliers all over the world were completely overwhelmed. They didn't know where to start. They had a different mindset on it, a different background, and obviously didn't feel the same way about all the necessities of all the things. So we had very high barriers to actually use the system. So from that point on, we actually start to try to get their opinion in and try to understand that they are our users, even if they're not our clients that are paying us, because we're mostly working with brands, or let's say tier 1 suppliers that are closer to the final product. That we said, okay, we need to speak with all the weaving facilities, with all the spinners, and even the farmers, because they are the ones finally that will give us the data. And if we cannot make them happy by building something for them, it will never work. So here we really changed, and we see that technologies have caught the enabler. It's a big help because you cannot do it without it, because you do not have the overview and the standardization to get everything that you need in order to get a good overview of what's going on. But on the other side, we always try to make sure that whatever we are building is actually be usable, not only for our clients, but also for the users that give us the data and that are in the end using the platform the most.
So how are the brands incentivizing suppliers to go and change what they're doing, right? In terms of gathering data. I mean, you talked about the role of regulation here before. And so on the one hand, some of these suppliers are actually being forced to do this. But on the other hand, forced by law. But on the other hand, we don't have this in many supply chains, and in fashion, we know that this is not necessarily the case yet in many places. So how do brands incentivize suppliers to be part of this system?
It's a great question, and it's a very difficult one, and something that, of course, we have not figured out to the fullest extent yet. But of course, we have, I think, by now thousands of suppliers that are already using the platform, and there must be a reason for it. I mean, you're right. The first thing is pressure. So what's happening is that Western companies receive pressure from consumers, governments, investors, and so on, and they take this pressure and they turn around into their supply chain and say, guys, here we go. I have these kind of regulations coming up to me. You're my suppliers. I'm paying you. You have to do it now. So technically, the pressure is just without any filter being pushed into the supply chain. And then, of course, it's triggering down, because if the tier 1 supplier has to do it, and the tier 2 supplier has to do it as well, and the tier 3 as well. And it just goes on and on and on. Next to that, everything we do right now and where we help has been done before, just very manually. Like, there's technically someone calling the suppliers. We have one company that has like a client of ours that has 300 people sitting there right now. And these 300 people doing every day nothing else than creating Excel files for doing manual tracing. 300 people. They create thousands of Excel files every day. No one is ever checking them, of course, because again, like, there's zero overview of what's going on there. But there's really 300 people sitting there. And now we come there and we speak to these companies and say, hey, look, you have an army of people sitting here that do very manual work. Let's help them, yeah, because the requirements are just growing, yeah, and then the next step is, yeah, then you need to get 500 people and 800 people and so on, and this doesn't work, and this is not economic. So the pressure is coming mostly from the brands and from the Western world, and it's flooding into the supply chains. The companies realize it, but they also realize that they can make money with it, because the suppliers that are the first movers here are, of course, the ones that can also brand themselves, and they can get new clients in, because if you cannot only sell a product that is high quality, but with that, all the supply chain information, you're currently really having a unique position in the industry, because everyone wants to have this.
Your competitive advantage is actually having information
so
that others don't.
Yeah, exactly. It's in the first step, it's compliance, doing the homework, and the second step is marketing and sales, making money of it. Yeah, and you can do both things with it. So, and that's what's making it so interesting.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move now, and Thijs, if you could maybe be our second panelist here to answer this question more broadly on, you know, the role of technology, but also the challenges that it brings to this.
Yeah, well, firstly, I think it's important to mention that it's a hard question, because in sustainability, I believe typically the definition of sustainability is defined by the problems you want to address, right? So if you ask the technology question, then the technology needs to be related to the problem that you want to address. And in a circular economy, that could be a recycling question, it could be a design question, it could be a remanufacturing or reverse logistics question. So there's lots of ways to approach the answer to this question. However, I think generically speaking, from my perspective, the role of technology for me at the moment in my current job, I would love to see technology for Philips play a bigger role in decision making. So really looking at the performance of our products and solutions, and through technology making more insightful how we make better, let's say more sustainable or more circular decisions in all corners of our large organization. So if you have 80,000 people and you want them to contribute to your circular economy goals, then you need to enable these people not just with a narrative or shared goals, but also by embedding circular economy and sustainability in your systems. And if you look at it from that perspective, then, you know, embedding circular economy in your decision-making processes or in your portfolio management tools and those kinds of things, yeah, I think is top of mind when it comes to, let's say, circular economy and technology for me at the moment. So the entire digital piece of it is very interesting and a huge challenge because of the quality of data, the fragmentation, tooling available, and also ongoing discussions on what are relevant metrics to report on, right? If reporting at this stage is sort of an end goal, which I personally believe it's not, obviously.
Okay, thank you. So I'm hearing that a lot of this is also related to how technology is going to enable us to make the right decisions in supply chains that are more circular as well. And so definitely keeping that obviously in mind. I think it's something that we all need to consider what metrics are being followed through, right? As we make sure that our supply chains are more circular as well. And so Fernanda, would you like to answer the question then?
Of course. I agree pretty much with Lucas, what he said, and we're speaking previously about a very important component here, which is trust. Now, circularity is trying to keep resources and products for the longest as possible, right? And what can be capped there, we need to find a way of reusing it somehow, right? Technology is a means to it, no? Is a tool that's going to allow us to measure where we are and where we want to go, give us this information and help us analyze, like, what are the ones that are actually being able to provide a transparency somehow. And through technology, we can engage the other ones eventually that are not on a transparent business to maybe feel compelled, engaged, and a little bit more committed to want to join that. So in terms of plastics for us, there are many recyclers as well out there claiming that they are recycling, claiming they're good practices. But at the end of the day, many of them, they're not. A lot is ending up on landfills as well, or being incinerated. So is this push a little bit to, like, do you want to be part of a big game? No, do you want a corporation to now come because they're being forced by, or they want to now show their consumers that they're doing well, right? Do you want to be part of that supply chain? So you will need to start playing with technology, like changing the rules of your business, showing and being more transparent. So you're actually able to, let's go back to our conversation, create this trust, right? So you don't want to miss out. You don't want to be the business that is not doing well. So technology will just bring this possibility. And again, and I really agree with you, there are people behind technology. Technology won't change anything if all of us is not changing. Like, we need to have a transparent conduct, a transparent behavior here. It's how do we want to do business? Technology is just helping us to say, you know what? So these ones are the ones that are really showing what they're doing, and these ones, they don't want to show. So what are the businesses that are going to remain? At the end of the day, we're talking about sustainability, no? Sustainability are the ones that are going to be performing economically well, but the ones that will be able to demonstrate that they can add to a community socially and environmentally. So at the end of the day, the ones that are hidden, that are opaque, they won't be the ones surviving, no, because they were not able to create trust. I don't want to share my data, then you doubt it. That's what I would say.
No, indeed. I think that obviously trust is really important. And I think what I'm hearing, this is kind of, it could be an interesting conversation along this to talk about the link between technology and trust, right? This is really, in some ways, also an enabler of, creating that transparency that could indeed lead to greater trust, or, but it could go the other way too as well. So, but indeed, we're trying to open up, right, and open up all this information lines to create that and build that trust.
And corporations as well. I'm sorry, sorry for interrupting you. I mentioned the recyclers not wanting, for example, to upload their invoices in our case, not to show exactly what they are recycling, but corporations there saying that they are compensating, or they're recycling, or they're using 100% recycled plastic for their packaging, or all the other claims that we know already, but they're not. So many times they are like claiming things that they're not doing, and technology will come back and say, you know what, you're not compensating 100%. You're far from compensating 60%. So both sides, that's why it's so important. Corporations can no longer claim things that they are not doing. So be careful if you're executives behind like huge corporations, like consumers, like over 55% of them, they're already looking to what you guys are doing. They will make better choices based on that.
Thank you. And so, at last but not least, Mattia, if you can also share your perspective on this.
Absolutely, and I can't agree more with the whole panel, and I didn't have much doubts about it, but all the concepts that have been shared here, I back them, and I do believe that actually data is the real game changer here, because everything that we've talked about is being informed. In decision making, is being informed as conscious consumers, is being informed as a company for the decisions that they take in their supply chain. So at the end of the day, when we talk about technology, mostly we're talking about being able to have the right information in the right moment. Most of us here are data companies, and that's not casual, I would say. The very fact is that information is allowing us to take better decision, is allowing us to make actionable decision. When we see something happening, we're able to attack, we're able to counteract directly on the spot. And this is why I think that technology is the real enablers, because it's helping us also in the commercialization of this data. The importance of data is not only important in the decision making. If we're not able to convey this information to the end consumers, to the stakeholders, to our whole value chain, we're missing out on an opportunity. And that data is what actually is making technology thrive these days. And we are looking at most of the companies that these days are having big successes, not only in the sustainability arena, but in general, on the internet era, are data companies. And we as sustainability professional, in my opinion, what are doing is being able to put the right information on CO2 emissions, on plastic traceability, on supply chain materials in front of the right persons, which were used to act over thousands of Excel sheets, as we were hearing from Lucas. So there's a switch and there's a change in the behaviors, and there's a switch and a change in the expectations of the consumers. So being able also to, through technology, commercialize the impact that these companies are making and that we as startups are helping corporations to make is absolutely fundamental in the circularity of the whole concept, if you may. One of the challenges that I'm experiencing, and there is a few, is the lack of education regarding sustainability. It only became a trend in the last 4 to 5 years, but that's actually a very well-known problem since the early 90s, unfortunately. And the regulations are always getting late. I mean, we're seeing in Europe right now, we are the one that are acting the most at the global level under a regulation perspective. But unfortunately, these regulations are slightly changing the game each and every time we have to face them. And it means that we're catching up on taxonomy, we're catching up on ESG reporting, and there's always kind of a small delay between what's needed and what's regulated after. So as innovators also, I think that technology can help us push this, can help us become part of the conversation, and can help us also create those paths to get there in a faster way. IPCC report came out 2 days ago, the second working group. It made pretty clear that the window for action is closing, and soon enough, we won't have time to counteract this disaster. So we need action right now. Information is the right way to go.
Thank you, Mattia. I really appreciate that. Obviously, like you said, the role of consumers and understanding the need for immediate action. And you know, there's a bit of, you know, we hear this obviously now for a long time. I also hear from Lucas, you know, 300 people putting in the data, right? So we need thousands of people, right, working on helping us with helping not just being more transparent, but also improving the processes themselves. And so that's going to be another important point here. We'll open up now to any questions you may have about circularity. And so maybe we'll start over here. And there's there a microphone that we could share with the audience? Oh, are these working? Okay.
So yeah, I used to work in the same industry. I lived in Asia for a long time, working in footwear manufacturing. We had a lot of issues with this sort of stuff. The stem of the data is often the issue. Like getting transparent data from the factory is nearby impossible. Yeah. Because their KPIs in some ways is to lie and to say, okay, we're better than we are. So how do you get, first of all, speak to the factories directly? Because you often go through agencies. And then also, how do you get those factories in the supply chain to actually tell the truth in some way?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, excellent point. Data quality is, let's say, one of the biggest challenges we are facing. And Now it's really about what kind of data are we talking about. So there's company data, there's data on the supply chains, on the transactions. So understanding how the companies are working with each other. Technically, there's data around like energy consumption and so on. And for everything, we try to identify other ways how to get it better done. First of all, we are working more and more with, again, primary data sources that are not directly connected to the supplier. So we're going directly to the auditors or certification bodies, because nowadays, nearly every, at least the tier 1 suppliers or the cut, make, trim facilities need to go through an audit, through a social audit, environmental audit. And if we have the chance to directly access the databases from the official auditing companies, we at least have a third party in. Of course, now you can come and say, yeah, there's still mistrust because these people might be part of the game and just give certifications because they get paid for it. But let's just assume we have a third party here, so that's already much better. For traceability, we're currently exploring really different partnerships where we get like a third party involved to verify the transactions. So we have the one supplier that is delivering the goods, we have the other supplier that is receiving the goods. So we have these two, but they are both like kind of primary players of the supply chain, so they could kind of not tell us the truth. So they'll know they're the third party that is actually validating if these companies work together. And this can be done on site, so they could actually visit the factories, or it could be done on desk. And here again, we are helping out, because what we do is we're not only tracking the purchase orders along the supply chain and try to match them, but we also check the actual goods, the actual flow of goods that is necessary in order to fulfill the purchase order. So when I order 10,000 t-shirts, I have the order, but I also have the 10,000 t-shirts that I could follow. And here it's about collecting digital inventories, digital data flows on the materials to understand, does it add up? So if you want to produce 10,000 t-shirts, you need 10,000 kilograms of cotton. So if only 5,000 kilograms of cotton get ordered, then the question is, where's the other 5,000 kilograms coming from? And our system is then putting up a warning and saying, hey, something is not adding up on the quantities. And there might be good reason for it, but at least we can give you the overview that this is something that you might check up and have a look at. And maybe it's just a forgotten transaction. Maybe it's something more serious. Maybe it's the inventory that was still there, but at least the system helps you to, let's say, prioritize where we need to ask questions and need to follow up on. Then there are stuff like energy consumption. To be honest, no chance. We collect it. We give the companies a chance to fill it in. What we do is then to cross-check and validate, does it make sense? Yeah. So we have the energy consumption, we have the production capacity, and then there's like a energy consumption per products getting out of the factory. And then of course we can benchmark this and say, yeah, this is a denim jeans, yeah, a denim product. It says 10 kilograms of CO2. There's one with 20, and then the question is, that's weird. If the average is 20 and this one has 10, that doesn't work. Like, it cannot be that sustainable, that CO2 like better with regards to CO2. So here then of course we can again have a, let's say, a warning system and say, hey, this is an outlier, this doesn't make sense, we need to check the numbers. But again, it's not perfect, but we can at least pinpoint down and say this is something that you need to question because it's vague, it doesn't add up, or it doesn't make sense. Yeah.
We will discuss there.
Yeah, but it's difficult, and there are so many challenges along the way, because also the suppliers just sometimes don't know. I mean, it's not only that they say it's fraud or they want to trick the companies, it's just sometimes they don't know, and then they are forced to give an answer. So like, okay, if you're forcing me, then you have your answer here, and I'm just writing something in and then just hope no one is checking it out. And this is currently what's happening most of the time. Yeah.
Well, good, interesting to hear these stories. Hopefully these are stories that could get a little better, right, with time as well. Yes, we have a question over here, and then I'll come.
So one of the key themes was obviously traceability, transparency, the importance of quality information. And one of the emerging technologies that's trying to provide all of that is obviously blockchain. I was interested in understanding whether the panelists think a blockchain is either like too emergent, it's too nascent, or is it more hype than value? And I imagine you guys all have views on it because it wasn't actually mentioned. So yes, I wondered if you kind of speak.
I give a very brief answer from my side. because we hear it a lot, especially the marketing people from our companies, like from our clients, come and say, "Oh, you're using blockchain, right?" So we're fully transparent now, right? And the answer is, of course, no. So blockchain is amazing when it comes to solve the problem of trust, but it doesn't help at all for the problem of traceability, because in the blockchain you have, let's say, all the different transactions, and you know exactly who has given what, and it's tamper proof. So when someone is saying something, it's in there. So I can really rely on this data. But who tells me that this data is correct? Yeah. So it doesn't solve the traceability challenge. Here it's about all these mechanisms we just discussed to make sure that the first data input is correct by itself. And this has nothing to do with blockchain. So actually, I would say blockchain is not the solution for traceability. It's the solution for solving trust issues along the supply chain. And traceability is then one big topic that we're currently discussing, and that's why these two things are often merged, but actually not necessarily connected. So you could build a traceability solution completely without blockchain. But if you want to bring trust into it, additional layer of trust, then blockchain offers a very, very nice element to it in order to get this tamper-proof audit log of all the transactions.
It's the opposite, actually, so what you said. It adds for the traceability, it doesn't exactly add for the trust. Is the opposite. No, it's not very shocking. Which means, like, for example, yeah, no, because we're speaking, but now it seems like it was the opposite. So we use blockchain, but it's not like blockchain won't solve all your problems, as you said. We use it because it's an easy tool to bring traceability. But at the end of the day, you need to trust your source. I think that's what we're speaking. It's not the opposite.
Yeah, it definitely just brings one of the two. I mean, the question is now how you define it. Yeah.
You can trace all the supply chain, but the person that is there adding the information to the blockchain is that you don't know if you can trust or not. So that's the point. So once you get the data and you see exactly who's claiming what, is when you're going back there and try to improve the trust that is behind. But I pretty much think that many businesses are using it as a hype. Like we're saying that we use it because it's really like what we are using in plastics, that we're creating the NFTs and non-fungible tokens, which each plastic recovery guarantee is a unique proof of a particular amount of plastic that was sold. So at least you can go back there and see all the different stakeholders involved on it. But it's true, if at the end of the day, you can trust that particular recycler that it's uploading the invoices there, or if you have an issue, you always need to go back and say, hey, what are you doing? You're uploading like an invoice from 2 years ago. So these things, they happen, you know. Blockchain helps until a point because it gives you this decentralized ledger, which means like if you want to change an information, you won't be able to do it for all the several thousands of computers, right? But the trust is still like, how do you know who's inputting the data?
I'm just going to interrupt you. I need to jump off, but I put my email address in the chat. So if you have any questions for Philips related, then I'll answer them over email. I'm very sorry, but I have a hard stop at I had a hard stop at 1.
Thank you for joining us, Thais.
I want to reach out to you actually. Let's see if we can compensate plastics with Philips as well.
There we go.
An invitation.
Some business opportunities here from the panel.
Well, of course. Yes.
Excellent. So we have a little bit more time left, so maybe we'll take another question over here.
Yeah. So you're all in B2B businesses, so the selling process is usually quite tricky. You also mentioned that technology is important, but kind of a means to an end. So what was the key thing to really showcase your value proposition to these companies, and perhaps what changed over time? You know, if you can share some insights into that process.
How do you sell this?
Mattia,
right? Basically, is how do we sell this? And Mattia, do you have a take on this?
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy question, definitely. Definitely not an easy question. And I think that any one of us having that answer would be more than happy. But I have to say that at the end of the day, there's a couple of things that you do, and is doing your homework. So understanding what are the requirements in the market, knowing your persona, knowing who you're talking to, who you're selling to, and what might be the challenges that that particular company is facing. So you segment your market and you try to understand where you can bring the more value. At the end of the day, and I'm talking from a Firstmatic perspective, we saw that there was a lack of traceability and a lack of transparency in anything that was related with tree planting industry. And what we wanted to do is to provide a visual way for everyone to be able to check whether or not, to verify whether or not their tree was planted, to verify whether or not their investment was actually fulfilled. When we did so, we understood by creating a very small MVP, we understood the potential of it. We understood that a data-driven solution could be ideal for most of the stakeholders involved, both the farmers and the NGOs through which we collaborate to plant and restore ecosystems, and also for the corporations and their end users. Because at the end of the day, when you create any type of value proposition, you need to map your stakeholders, you need to understand where are you bringing the value. And we operate, and we're not the only one, in this panel, pretty much everyone operate with multi-stakeholders, value chains, and we need to consider, for instance, that if we want to innovate on an aspect, we need to be able to involve the farmers that plant the trees. We need to involve the end users of the corporations that actually will verify if that tree is going to be planted or not. And we need to involve the stakeholders in the corporations because we need to be able to vehiculate our message. We need to be able to vehiculate the value proposition that we want them to show. So there's a number of things that you do previously, and you check what your competitors are doing. You check the market conditions, you check where the investment is going, and then you try to create your basic MVP, and you go knocking a lot of doors until someone answers, and you're very happy when that happens.
But like you said, absolutely also take a look at the competition to understand what your value proposition is over and above what's being offered as well.
And actually, you're building over usually something that it's always been there. So you're trying innovation incrementally. We make it happen incrementally. Usually, it's not something that that we have invested, I don't know, 10 years in an innovation hub being funded and then put it in the market. It's something that can happen incrementally, and that's something that can happen also through revenues that you're gathering with your initial sales.
Okay. Great, thank you. I'm conscious of the fact that we started late and we want to maybe get you all out of here. I just want to leave you with a message, and I first of all thank the panelists for being a part of this, and leave you with the message. I mean, two things. One is, you know, there's a typical. We start with the challenges that I'm hearing. Garbage in, garbage out. Right? This is what we say with data and technology, and that's exactly what it's what I hear. This is where trust issues come in, but at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity for transparency, and the opportunity is so great that we actually have here 3 panelists from 3 very different industries. I mean, apparel, plastics, and or at least verticals, right? Apparel, plastics, and carbon emissions. And so just to show that there's a lot happening when it comes to figuring out how to enable circularity and using technology to enable that. As we all discussed, this is not the only solution. We need to consider changes in processes, changes in technology, and changes in relationships. And perhaps the last one is one of the hardest. But there is plenty of opportunity as well. Thank you all for being here. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference as well. And go out and keep doing good while doing great as well.
Thank you.
Doing well.
Hi everyone, just so we're cutting off now for lunch break. Please make sure to be back by 1:55 for our keynote speaker with Dorothy Shaver from Unilever. Thank you.
I was so
They provide lunches. Oh, we can go to the cafe. I don't know where it's going.
Yeah, sure.
Sí, por favor, conectamos. Sí, sí, sí. Te tengo el LinkedIn. Lo voy a mirar. Yo estoy segura que estamos en LinkedIn, ¿verdad?